Okay, hello everyone, and welcome Lewis and Alan. First of all, let's go to Lewis. Could you introduce yourself, please?
I can. Thanks for having us, Ed. Pleasure to be here to have a chat. My name's Lewis Keynes. I'm the Director of Sport at the British School Manilla. I've been in Manilla now for 7 years, following a stint working in Wetherby in England. At the end of this school year, just next month, hopefully, if travel's allowed, I'm moving to Malaysia to take up post at the Alice Smith School. So an exciting time for me and lots of challenges ahead.
Excellent. And Alan?
Yeah, morning. Thanks, Ed, for inviting us on. It's a privilege and an honour. Yeah, I'm Alan Dunstan. I'm curriculum leader for PE Health and Wellbeing at British School Manilla. I've been here for 8 years. Previous to that, I was 5 years in Qatar, 2 years in Spain, and then I started my career with a 5-year stint in the UK in Scunthorpe and in the Rotherham area as well. So a tough upbringing, and then the delights of working internationally. And I'll be moving on to the British International School of Riyadh in the diplomatic quarter in August. I'm really looking forward to getting that a little bit closer to home and setting up a new school and a new challenge.
Lovely. So the dream team is being broken up, but I know that you also have the Infinite Learners website. Would you like to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, it all sort of accelerated quite quickly. We never had any kind of ambition to have a website, and we never thought it'd be something that we did. And we sort of learned on the job. Dumb and Dumber springs to mind when it comes to trying to get us to organise websites and marketing and design. But we've been helped by a great team of people who are close friends of ours that have really helped us to put a lot of this together. And the idea was is around very much around the kind of thing that we love doing. We've worked for great leaders and we've worked for not so great leaders, and we want to be in a position where we can help people develop their leadership skills, develop their abilities and their knowledge in PE and sport, and around how to deal with people and people's welfare. And our tagline is all about being better educators and better humans. And what we want to do by launching this website is just give people the opportunity to pause and stop and listen, and to encourage them to listen to people around them, and ourselves included in that, to learn and hopefully to share some of the things that we can share, but also hopefully share things that are out there. Some of the stuff that people like you guys are sticking on Twitter, and the work that you're doing in terms of trying to get people developing and people pushing on and being ready to crack on and get better at what they do. We love it, and that's all we're about.
Yeah, I can add to that with what Louis says there. I think lockdown it's been tough, and it's obviously it's been terrible for all involved in teaching and learning and trying to do online differences with PE. It's very hard. In terms of us, we made a real positive effort to get something from the lockdown, and it's been an absolute pleasure to reflect on a huge amount of time and our personal lives over the last 8 years and beyond that, and get our ideas down and formulate a wise look at, what do we really want from PE? What do we really want to be as leaders? And use that model to produce this website, to produce our articles, to really get a feel for the next step really on our journey. And we've been teaching a long time, and I think we felt that, can we give something back, and can we then get together with like-minded people and also diversity as well, just to make the whole PE experience so much better. So our tagline really was just be better and be better humans, and that's a key thing that comes through this whole lockdown experience is that human connection and the value of it.
Excellent. I just love the humility of you guys and your approach and your openness, and I can echo what you're saying. This past couple of months, never had so much headspace to reflect and think, and having no fixtures and things like that, you've just got time to look back on your profession and connect with people. And the PE community has never been stronger and more proactive, I think, as well. For those watching, highly recommend the PE in a post-quarantine world and the next new normal post that you've written. They've sort of inspired my thinking as well. and springboarded it really. But you mentioned there, Alan, why, and that's really one of my first questions. When schools return to PE in September, touch wood, it's going to look very different, and we know that. And we're really going to have to discuss and think about with our departments what we're doing and why we're doing it. So as a PE department, when you guys really sat down and asked that question to yourselves and each other, why are we doing this? What answers did you get?
It's a good question.
There is.
Yeah, you come back to your why, and we read a lot about Simon Sinek and his work, and I fully recommend anybody to read through his books. They're fantastic, and they've made us really think. When we think about PE, are we trying to create professional athletes? That's some of the things that PE's come a long way from, that sort of mindset, and we felt that the vast majority of our sort of captive audience are kids that don't particularly enjoy PE. They get on really well, and they'll do what's asked. But do they really enjoy it? And will they continue doing it when they leave school? So it was taking that step of thinking, what do we want students to get out from PE when they leave school? And it came back to very much a concept-based approach of transferable skills. We're not looking at creating athletes. We're not looking at creating sports performers that are elite. We're dealing with real life people, and the vast majority of those just need to be physically literate, and they need to then be able to access the next level. Now, you look at the stats that John O'Sullivan talks about in his Changing the Game project, the amount of kids that drop out of sport, and looking at the reasons why for that. It's not enjoyable, it's too much coaching, it's too much pressure. And in our interview with Rebecca Russell the other day, she talked about being put off sport at school, and you can speak to so many people that have had a negative sport experience or PE experience at school, and they take that with them for the rest of their lives. And it was trying to just shift the mindset of PE staff and the PE world to bring it back to what is actually our purpose. And it was almost Joe Wicks that got this thinking. He's there on his morning slots doing physical activity, which is what it is basically. He's standing up and people are copying what he's doing. And we had a real discussion about that in the early days of lockdown of, is that what we are then? Are we just physical activity instructors and kids just copiers? Or do we provide so much more than that? And yeah, we do. We all know that. But I think the vast majority of the population think that that's just what we do. We just do a Joe Wicks. We stand up there and kids just follow us. And that's where the debate started with Susie Stevens in New Zealand about the E. I'll talk about later on, but it's hidden curriculum that we provide needs to be front and center. It's not about the physical skills of doing a layup shot or being able to play a lofted pass. It's about those resilience, the gratitude, the collaboration, the cooperation. They're hidden. Now, why should we have them as hidden? Why don't we have them front and center as the concepts by which we drive our curriculums? And that's sort of, that's down the line we want to go down and pursue further. And it's something that we've explored over the last few years. And I'm sure Lewis will probably just elaborate on that now.
Thank you.
Sorry, excuse me if you saw me fiddling about with my headphones. A bit of background noise, so hopefully this is a bit better. It comes down to for us to consider what actually makes PE, and Alan alluded to the fact there that, you know, this is a real time to stop and pause and consider that. And there are so many different strands or aspects of PE for us to consider if we're going to be good at what we do. Physical education is the outcome of a number of different strands, and you know, Alan's already talked about a few of these, but you're looking at well-being and transferable learning skills as relatively new things that people are talking about when they talk about PE, but they've always been there. I think now people are just becoming more aware of how important they are. Within PE, you've also got sport. Sport is sometimes, and physical activity in a similar way that Alan just mentioned, are sometimes seen as a bit of an enemy, and that if you're going to do PE and good PE, you can't do sport, or now you shouldn't do physical activity. Of course you should. Of course they should be there as strong aspects of a good PE curriculum. And then you've got things such as physical literacy, which is incredibly important in the development of children, as well as things like structured exercise and understanding that children and young adults can exercise individually and alone, and that has a part in PE as well. So I think the whole thing starts to come into this melting pot of really considering what PE is and whether you've got that balance right at the school that you're in. And I think that's the sort of stage of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, even the name of your department in British School Manilla, you know, Physical Health and Wellbeing Department, you know, I see straight away it underlines what you're about. And if I'd put my hands up now and being head of department at a brand new school, built it from scratch, in the early days, we needed some quick wins, I suppose, for our senior team and the parents, you know, get some teams together, get some fixtures, get some wins. And, you know, at the moment, if I'm completely honest, our curriculum is based around supporting sports and the local leagues. And, you know, we do football when the football fixtures happen, and then we shift it. And, you know, and we had this discussion as a PE department the other day. And like you said, every PE teacher deep down has the same whys. You know, it's the reason you probably got into the job. But for whatever reason, the front and center, like Alan was saying, is not probably the correct front and center, but we can still use sport as that vehicle. So you mentioned your curriculum and your approach. So could you outline that concept-based curriculum and the structure of it, and perhaps even maybe link it to the current situation and what PE departments might want to think about when they return in September?
Yeah, I think that the main thing to consider with children coming back in September is the fact that their life has been very different, and it's probably been different for many children for 3, 4, maybe 5 months. And speaking to colleagues in different countries, Vietnam are back, Hong Kong are back, Taipei are back, Singapore are back, and you're in a position where it's relatively evident that some of the children are much further behind in terms of their emotional development, or in terms of their ways and their coping mechanisms emotionally, than maybe we thought they were, and maybe we gave credit for. I think there's still maybe a perception within people going back to school that when we go back to school, it's just like going back to school normally, and everything will return to normal, and the kids will be uber enthusiastic. And I think in many ways that won't be far wrong. I think that will be, children will be ready to get back there, and staff will be excited. But there'll also be a lot of anxiety, and there'll be a lot of anxiety around a lot of different issues because of the fact that children have been out of school. Their experiences whilst being out of school will be very, very different. And our job as a teacher is to very quickly evaluate that and be clever in our planning and our approach to try and support that. And it doesn't just rest on PE teachers, but we're the kind of people that take responsibility on. You know, PE teams and PE teachers want to step up, and when times are tough, they are the department in a school that says, let us have a go at this. And, you know, that's the part of the reason that we're the kind of people that we are. But I think linking it to the concept-based curriculum and what we do at BSM, we very much value the students' emotional welfare. We have a well-being framework that's very in-depth, and our concepts within those well-being frameworks are very much varied and very much an opportunity for children to get to grips with different tools that will allow them to be quite good adults. And when I mean good adults, I mean adults that can self-regulate, adults that understand they need a sense of belonging and social connection, adults that are appreciative of an active and balanced lifestyle and they know what that looks like, adults that can be resilient and have a capacity for growth, and adults that essentially can put themselves in any kind of position, whether that be a collaborative or an individual position in any context in life, and call upon the skills and the things that they've been taught and the things that they've learned through PE and sport. We've said it a couple of times that the concept of collaboration is one that everybody will need throughout their life. What better way of learning collaboration than relying on teammates in a team game? What better way than relying on a shared understanding of what a set of values are, or how you need to present yourself and how you need to make sure that you support others through sport and in PE lessons. And that would just be one example, of course. But in terms of concepts, we've got to be in a position where we look at that bigger picture, and we start then to work backwards, and we start right at the bottom. And we say, right, what do these children need to be able to access the vehicle of sport, PE, physical activity, physical literacy, whatever it is that's the focus at your school, to be in a position to be able to develop and to push on, and to be able to understand what these different concepts are within, in our example, it's our wellbeing framework, but each school will have their own context and their own why, as we've mentioned already, and their own reasons for doing it. So I think that's probably the important question going forward in terms of linking concepts is what are the concepts that you feel are important for the children in your school moving forward? And then how are you going to try and use sport, PE, and all those different aspects and strands of sport and PE that I've talked about to really push your children forward and deliver on that?
Yeah, I can add to that, Ed. I mean, Lewis has put it really well there. I can just do a little bit more logistics on it, and I think that's important to look at. Our health and wellbeing framework is fairly new, and nothing we're doing here is set in stone, and we're learning all the time, and it's important that we're experimenting and to have that opportunity that we can improve, and we're sharing that all the time. If there's people out there that want to know more about concept-based learning, there's a lady called Julie Stern who's wrote the book on it, and she came and did us a couple of days inset, and it just blew your mind on the level she was at academically, and how you could then bring that into PE, because PE is not generally utilised in any textbooks about approaches to learning. It's always off you go and find out as PE teachers. And we did a lot of work with Julie where we plan with a understanding by design mechanism, which is taking what you want to achieve and bringing it back through learning objective transfer of skills. But the key with concept-based learning is the transference of skills. And as Lewis said there, the concepts are entirely dependent on the school. And we're lucky we've got a health and wellbeing framework where we've got things like self-acceptance as our concept. Now, within self-acceptance, we then have a number of objectives that we want to achieve from that. And we can use the vehicle of sport or physical activity to do that. I think the key in this is student choice. We've gone heavily down the line of auditing what do students actually want from this experience. You can go and put out a games-based curriculum that's focused on your extracurricular program. Might switch off 60% of your kids that are not representing your school. So why are we doing it? And it, like I said, comes back to the why again. If we want our vision to be all students to be physically literate, global citizens that can access sport when they leave school, then everything should be based around that vision. And it's asking them what they want. And we found out from numerous surveys that they like to work in different styles of groups, that they don't all want to do competitive games. Some want to do practice. That maybe they like to work in girls-only groups, boys-only groups, some like mixed. So for us, it was a total mind shift from what we think, oh, right, here we go, start of the year, we've got a mapping that's set out. We're going to do athletics, we're going to do invasion games, we're going to do usual traditional games-based program. We threw that out of the window, and every term we're almost making it different according to student choice. Now that's more work, and it's group lists that continually change, and you've got senior members of staff saying, well, show us your mapping. And we're like, well, our mapping changes according to what students want. We've got our themes, we've got our concepts, but the actual activity that we will do to match those concepts will depend on student choice. A really good example of that is when we're looking at literacy unit and we test their physical literacy skills. From that data, they will then choose groups that's appropriate for their level of ability. So there might be an invasion games group, and the students will think, well, that's going to be at a higher level. But if I haven't got those skills to access that, I can go into an object control group where I'm developing my throwing and catching and my confidence. So we have to cater for what students we've got, and that's different in every year group, as you know. Yeah. So that's a little insight into logistics.
I think to add another layer onto that as well, and Alan's articulated that really well without showing diagrams, which is always difficult for us PE teachers. But you know, if you look at that in a primary sense as well, I'm just speaking to somebody I'll be working with at Alice Smith School just earlier today, and we were talking about this kind of concept of starting with some core activities, and then the medium-term planning be conceptual, which allows the teachers the freedom to then change and adapt based on how well the children learn, which is surely everything that we're about as teachers. You know, many times you'll see a medium-term plan that's very specific in what will be delivered in what lesson, and regardless of children's progress, that's what's going to be delivered. So there's heading lesson 1 and passing lesson 2 and long passing lesson 3 and shooting lesson 4, and maybe there's not as much conscious thought as there should be on actually, well, how are these kids developing? And the way that we've tried to do it is by starting off with a core game or two in primary school that look at some of these fundamental skills in action and the linking and transferring them, and then very much leaving it to the member of staff and saying, listen, have an initial lesson or two around these games and variation of these games, and just stop and look and see what's happening and consider which parts of the lesson the children can access and which parts they're really struggling with. And that will give you the answer onto then how to develop and how to plan the learning for the children for the next 4 or 5 weeks, which when you say it in simple terms, sounds very, very simple to do. We know as PE teachers that sometimes that takes the extra time and effort that is the holy grail for us that we're constantly searching for. But it's that kind of approach that will allow you to change your practice to be able to really provide for the children that are in your class. And those concepts and that understanding by design model really allow teachers to do that without it being prescribed and feeling like they need to rush because they've got to do something else next lesson, and then there's something else because everybody needs to be at the same stage by the end of the unit. I think
I'm just imagining, like you were saying before, Lewis, about these children coming back in September. Like I say, they're going to be excited to walk into that sports hall and see their mates, first of all, but then they're going to be anxious. They might not want to go near each other. Different things like that's going to happen. But if they're presented, there's 2 options really. It could be presented with a bleep test because, you know, blast the cobwebs out, you haven't done anything for a while, you know, and that could happen in some schools. Or they could be presented with a choice of what they'd like to do. And that will make it a much safer place for them, and that might just really change that attitude and approach. And if we can start the year from there, you know, who knows where it could go. And but like you say, it's tough for teachers. You know, they've just rushed from wherever, they've come to their class, and they might just default to that passing football lesson or something they've got in the bank. But yeah, it's going to be tough. But
you know what, you can understand that, and you can forgive teachers for that, because it'll be an anxious time for teachers as well, and they won't maybe want to try something new because they've been out of teaching in real life for so long. But I'll give you an example. I spoke with a colleague at a big school in Singapore just a couple of days ago, and he was taking me back and reflecting on when he started at this school, a huge school, very demanding parents, and a great sporting profile and history. He hit the ground from England, and he thought, hang on a minute, you know, we've got to be the best at under 11 level, and we've got to do morning trainings, and we've got to get the kids in some conditioning programs, and we've got to do really, really well. And he said he got caught up in that kind of mindset because he realized how competitive the sport was. And it took him between 18 months and 2 years to actually stop and say, well, what are we doing this for and why? And I think having had this time, it gives anybody, especially somebody going to a new school or into a new country, the opportunity to just think about that as they go in, rather than trying to keep up and catch up with what's already happening, but maybe to look at things objectively and take that to a head of department or a director of sport. And they should love that. They should absolutely love that a new member of staff is coming in with some ideas and some perspective on what's going on. And that can then be used to build on and to really progress.
Particularly in an international context, it's very common, you know, here in Dubai, 80 schools within the federation or within a small area competing against each other. It takes brave leadership and brave, you know, heads of PE and directors of sport to say, you know what, we're not bothered about the results. We're bothered about what the kids get out of representing their school or out of their PE lessons. Just want to come back earlier, Alan. You said keeping the E in PE, and I know there's lots of that on the moment we can read about. Could you sort of describe or explain that phrase and give us an example of what that would look like in a PE lesson within this concept-based approach?
Yeah, certainly. Like I say, I'm no expert in this. It's certainly trial and error that we've showcased. Certainly reckon, listening to Susie Stevens, as I've said before, in New Zealand, she's a professor at Canterbury, and she did a brilliant webinar on the EMPE, and far more eloquent than what I am. But I can give you the real life situation, what it looks like, and I think that's a good context to start with. Let's take a primary lesson, for example, where invasion games, we would have a generic invasion game. We wouldn't say we're doing football, basketball. We don't do that at BSM. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but we decided to go generic, so that we like to create different ball skills that are involved in that, using feet, hands, whatever, different implements. But the concept for our invasion games wouldn't be those physical literacy skills. It would be cooperation and collaboration. So the whole learning objectives that are put up on the board and the success criteria would be related to the collaboration and the cooperation that's going on. Within those, you might have a physical literacy focus of throwing and catching, but they're not the be all and end all of it. So it could be that today we're going to work on helping each other to improve. The success criteria then would be, well, can you communicate effectively? Do you speak to your partner? Do you give them praise? Everything would be geared towards that. They're still playing the games. They're still doing the skills that we associate with PE, the physical skills, but the focus is purely on doing those life skills that they can then take to their next lesson. They could be sat next to someone in their primary classroom in their next lesson who they've never communicated with, but as a result of that PE lesson, when they've worked together and had to communicate because I've demanded it, that will transfer really well into that next lesson then. It then comes back to big business and Google and Apple. All they look for now is these life skills. They look for the collaboration, the cooperation, the resilience. They don't ask for whether you can do a layup or not. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They don't, do they? Do you know what I mean? So the emphasis is moved away from that physical and to the life skills that are transferable, that will make them better in their jobs come long term, better students, better humans, which is what our catchphrase is. So that's a little bit of how it might look. I don't know if Lewis, you could probably elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, because I think for some people listening to that, they might think there's a big glaring hole there. And well, you're in PE, and why aren't you looking at skills? Like, that's really important. And I think in many ways they'd be right. I think the key information to add to what Alan said there is that this is where sport and PE work really well together. In our PE lessons, children work around concepts. The focus isn't how well they can throw and catch. It probably isn't necessary in terms of their life skills, whether they can throw and catch, but and how they do it is probably even less so. But there are lessons within that of self-acceptance, self-regulation. There are lessons around how they can reflect and improve. And then if they really want to learn how to throw with a great technique, there's a sports program for that. And if they want to go to that, they can do it. So, you know, we could spend a lot of time in a basketball PE lesson, looking at double dribble, looking at how we receive and pivot, looking at how we can make sure we don't travel, but we don't do that. We don't even go as far really of looking at the specifics of how to pass. It's more about movement, being aware, communication, why it's important to be assertive when you're asking for the ball, where sometimes you might need to keep your mouth shut, and that's effective communication. And then if they really want to know about those specifics of that sport, and they want to know about double dribble, they want to know how to javelin pass, they want to know how they can ensure that their pivoting is very good and they can post up, then that's what our basketball coaches would love to speak to you about and go through hundreds and hundreds of drills around and condition games that will help you to do that specifically really well. And that's where I think we start to get that right from our opinion, in our context, because we're giving the children enough within a PE lesson for them to have a positive experience without watering it down, without making it wishy-washy and easy. There's still expectations and there's still things that we demand from our students, but giving them that opportunity to do it in different contexts and to learn the skills and to link them in a number of different ways. And then that transfer comes when they've got the opportunity to go to a sport program of their choice and learn specifically about that sport.
I'm just thinking of sort of PE teachers that may watch this. And when I ask my department the why question, why do we do what we do? One of the first answers, and a common answer, is to give them a broad experience of sports, give them the skills to access the sports. That's one of the things, being able to access sports. So when they grow up, they're more likely to remain active by playing these sports. Now, and like you say, they're going to be physical literacy components to this. But I would say to those people, and tell me if you agree or disagree, that if we're looking at problem solving, and it's a netball lesson, and you've got to get the ball from that end to that end, I'm not going to teach you the types of passes, but through communication and problem solving and leadership within this lesson, whatever the concept may be, they're going to find a way to do that, and they're going to learn how to get better at passing anyway. Would you agree with that in your experience?
To a certain extent, yeah, and I think you can throw in names of approaches there. Your TGFU, your constraints-led approach. You can do it in a myriad of different ways. And I think everything we're trying to really do here is take what you've said there and allow schools to apply the approach that works for them. So there are elements of a constraints-led approach that are great for exactly that kind of example. And saying, listen, let's get the ball from here to here, but you can't pass to this player, or this player can only take one pass on the way to the other side. There's a number of ways you can do it. And then a TGFU approach might be, well, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it 3v2 or 2v1, and then we're going to stop halfway through and look at what we can't do and go back in. And there are temptations to do it in that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the staff that you talked about there that are fixed on the sports and picking up skills for sports, there's a place for it, whether that's in PE or not, is a different conversation maybe. And I have my own opinions on that. But when you're going into that kind of problem-solving territory and you're giving children scenarios, for me, that's much more about transferable skills, and it's much more about the concepts that they'll have to deal with in other lessons, in other subjects, in other contexts, and in other scenarios in their life that become really important. And whether they actually could catch the netball or not, probably aren't.
I fully agree, and it's the infinite model that we talk about, and having a range of approaches. An infinite model allows you to be totally flexible. When we look at a lot of schools to say, oh, we're inquiry-based learning, well, do you just do inquiry-based learning, or do you incorporate other models as well? Because there's no one model that is the be-all and end-all of teaching, otherwise we'd all do it. And it's having a hybrid of models that you can utilize to get the best from each and every student. And it's interesting when you come back to your why. That's a battle where you've got different opinions that you have to tackle, that diversity, and have these frank conversations that, yeah, you're going to have PE teachers who have got big personalities, and you've got a lot of you in a room who are very driven towards sport. But physical education, in its pure form, it is not sport. Sport is, as Louis said, sport is your extracurricular, and it's team-based. And you've got to look at the stats. How many of our kids, how many girls, for example, go on and play netball when they're 18 years old? How many go and play hockey? And these are things that dominate curriculums across the world. How many boys go and play basketball in the UK after they've finished school? So you then bring it back to, well, why are we doing it then? So if you have your why is because it's collaboration, communication, I think that's acceptable. If your why is we're doing it because we want to make them better basketball players, well why? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. There's no point to it, and I think that's right. So important that in teams you talk about what your purpose is.
And I was watching a webinar a couple of nights ago with Professor John Hattie, author of Visible Learning, and I tweeted you guys about it, so you probably know what I'm about to say. But yeah, he spoke about big companies wanting these skills. You mentioned it before, Lewis, and I just think PE is the place in school where that is, it's sort of made for it. And this is the bit I wanted to get to. So you mentioned there, Alan, the infinite model. I read this in your post-PE in a post-quarantine world. Could you outline that infinite model a little bit more for us? Because it sort of goes through, right, how we as teachers can perhaps implement something like this.
Yeah, I'll let Lewis do the infinite learner model in terms of an individual and how teachers are. I can quickly go through what I mean and what we talked about as a model. And there's so many approaches to learning. Obviously, you've just talked about Hattie as visible learning. We've got concept-based learning. We've got project-based learning, inquiry-based learning. There's a myriad of approaches out there. And like I said, there's no one right or wrong method. And if we want to get the best of every child, we use a hybrid. And hence we use the term the infinite model as a mixture of different concepts together to get it right for the individual child. And I can give you an example of it. When we're looking at student choice, some students prefer to go down a practice model where they're getting taught quite direct coaching. You need to learn to throw and catch. They want to learn to throw and catch. So they have that direct instruction, and it's very simple. You'll have people in the same year group who would say, right, I really want to develop my advanced skills in badminton. So you might go down a line of inquiry based there and say, right, well, what do you need to do in order to get better? And they'll come up with a project. They'll have their iPads. They'll be watching videos. They'll be very much directed by their own motivation. And then you've got a group of kids who are not that interested, but they don't want to play sport. They're quite introvert, and they might just want to do something where, you know what, I'm not a great swimmer, but I'm not interested in joining the swim team, but I do need to work on my strokes, and I do want to use swimming as a vehicle to improve my fitness. So you might use quite a gentle approach there where it's, yeah, we'll give you some drills, but you also then have got to go and find out a little bit more about improving your technique. So you're using a hybrid of approaches to get the best from all our students. So I don't think there's one size fits all, and that's where the infinite model sort of grew and where we're progressing with it. And as I said, it's not something that's set in stone. That's the whole purpose of it. It's something that's going to evolve over time. Lewis, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about our teaching model to that.
Yeah, just before I go into maybe what an infinite learner maybe looks like, the infinite model, I think I agree with everything Alan said there, which probably isn't surprising. But you're in a position where there's so much research and so much academia around PE and pedagogy, which is just superb. And we know through research and through experience that the experience plays a huge part in this as well. You can't just take something from research and necessarily apply it. There's a learning process there. And I think sometimes the temptation with approaches is just to pick something up, whether it's an approach or a ready-made curriculum from a third-party provider online that it is undoubtedly probably high quality, but does it fit the context that you're in? And can you lift it up and drop it in a school? And the answer is probably no. And the whole idea around infinite learning is actually to just step back and have a look at what suits your school best and not close off to anything. And being an infinite learner and everything that we see that to be about is about attributes and values and almost non-negotiables that you set for yourself to be open to these ideas. Yes, the last thing we want sometimes at work is more work. And the last thing we've got is the time to do it. But go back to your why and look why you're doing it. And if it is the right thing to do for the children, then do it. Take that extra time, go that extra mile, work in a team, pull in experts, delegate where you have the opportunity, pull people on board, have champions, and then start to develop together. It's not a one-person job. And to be an infinite learner, you've got to be reflective. You've got to be able to honestly say, was that any good? And be frank with yourself. And that links with another attribute, which is really important, which is honesty. If you can't be reflective and you can't be honest, you're never going to have a chance. And as soon as you're reflective and honest, you're going to be showing some humility, because you're going to have to put your hand up like we have on numerous occasions and said, oops, we got that wrong. And that's going to happen, and it's going to continue happening. And I think part of it is accepting that. and then having the ability to listen, to really listen. And it's something I've got much better at as I've got older. I didn't want to listen when I was an NQT and the year after that, and probably the year after that, because I thought I knew everything and I had all the great ideas. And looking back, I wish I had have done, but now I do. I'd like to think I listen a lot better, and I take on opinion and I take on views. Once you've listened, be willing to learn and be humble enough to say, yeah, do you know what, that's really good. I didn't know that. Because another temptation of people that are leading is often to pass ideas off as their own, or to say they knew it anyway, which is often rubbish. And then to share and be open with the things you're doing. And the learn, listen, share model is everything we're about with the website we're doing. And more importantly, it's everything we've been about for years with what we do for the children and how we help to develop our staff in the department. I think both Alan and I came into PE teaching probably for the children and to develop the children first and foremost. But since then, I think we both developed a real love for developing good people and values-driven people, and not necessarily hiring a skill set. And I know we're going to write about recruitment in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but we don't look for a skill set when we go out there. We look for the brass tacks and the tick boxes, and then it's more about the character and the person that's sat in front of you and what they're about and what kind of values they have. And then after the learn, listen and share and being that good person with good values, it's genuinely wanting to be better, not saying it and not just thinking, oh yeah, well, it sounds nice and I'll just say I want to be better, but actually I'm not going to listen. I'm not that bothered about learning. I don't want to be honest and humble. I don't want to admit if I've done something wrong in front of my peers because somebody's going to get an upper hand on me. It's actually leaving your ego at the door and saying, well, hang on a minute, we're all in this together. We all want to get better. And that's what I want to do. And you know what? To a lot of people, that sounds really idealistic, and I get that. But it's the only way that as a community and as educators, that we will have an infinite mindset and we will want to push on. There is no signpost. There is no finite end to what we do. The children in schools are going to be here a lot longer than we ever are. So we're here for a short little spell within that, and we do what we can, to do the best for that and to set that up to continue. And if we're not doing that, then we're doing the whole system and the children and the staff that we work with a huge disservice.
Loving the passion and experience coming through here, gents. It's great. And I like any difficult thing I picked up on most there, any difficult conversations, or when people say they're busy or it's stressful or it's taking extra effort, remind them of that why. Make sure that why has been agreed first and foremost, and everyone's dug deep and nailed it on the head. Because I suppose if that's the strongest thing, you can never get past that or around that, and that will justify everything else moving forward.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but I would add a caveat that if you have people in your team that are honest and show humility, and they can be frank and they can be open, then you know when they're working too hard, and you know when they're taking it home with them, and you know when that weight's on their shoulders, and they'll tell you, and you can see it in them, and you can listen to them, and then the next step is acting on that and not making demands that are too high, which I think we've all been guilty of in the past. But really understanding that staff want to do well and they want to work hard and they want the best for the kids, but they have to look after themselves as well. And it's getting that balance. And I think that's another aspect of a really good leader, is somebody who values that and probably puts that ahead of everything else. If you've got people that genuinely care for each other in your team and look out for each other, then that's a wonderful place to work. And we've been really privileged to work with a team of people like that for several years now.
Great. So I suppose one of my final questions really is a bit of a selfish question, but I imagine it takes very brave leadership, courage, resilience to move towards this different curriculum. You know, Alan, you said you threw out that other one out the window. That was your phrase, and
yeah.
I just, make me thinking of doing that makes me feel a bit. What will the leadership say? What will those kids that are in the sports teams, how will they feel? Will I disengage them? What about their mums and dads? And what have you done? Why is he playing? And why are you putting him on? And how do we as leaders of PE, do any tips, any advice? What's it like?
Yeah, I think the best way of doing this, if I attack this from a curriculum point of view, and then Lewis can come at it from an extracurricular, I think they'll really help out. And that's the key here as well, is looking at those dynamics. We don't do the same job. I sort out curriculum, Lewis does extracurricular. Although we're intrinsically linked, you've got two roles that are very different, and they have someone who's got a focus on them, and it really helps that. And I know a lot of directors of sport across the world are doing a dual role there, and I think that's really tough, and maybe something that you look at in your whys. We've been lucky that we had a brilliant leader in Simon Mann who allowed us experimentation and also knew what was required as an ex-PE teacher, and we're fortunate to work under him. In terms of the process for change, I think is what you're getting at in it there. If you've ever looked at Cotter's change process model, that's what we did, and sometimes you do without knowing research suggests, but we were lucky that in the NPQL we knew that Cotter had a change model, and we've sort of adapted that slightly for the infinite learners, and it always comes back to the why. We've already established that, but you've also, when you wanted to make change, you've got to also look at your parameters. What are your facilities? What's your staffing? What's the vision of the school? What's your school numbers? What's your demographics? What is your target audience? What are your parents like? You've got to take everything into consideration. I did use the phrase that I threw it out, but it was over a period of time, and it was with a huge amount of collaboration on there as well. So the parameters are really important, where to do this kind of model, you do need to have good staffing ratios. To suddenly go to student choice groups, you need to have a surplus of staffing to be able to give smaller groups out and be flexible in how we do that. So the third thing on the step process would be to change slowly. You can't do it all in one hit. We've done things with sample groups. We've introduced physical literacy slowly over a period of time with primary. It's now brought up into Key Stage 3. We've introduced the health and wellbeing framework just in Key Stage 3, and then it'll filter up. So it's choose an experiment group and almost treat it as like a research project. So I was lucky enough to do the NPQL, and I used physical literacy as a project with primary school, and that then gave us data. It gave us the evidence behind it, gave us the research to say, look, this is what's right. We're going to try this. Let's see what happened as a result, and then let's plan forward from that. And that was really powerful to have that data to prove to parents, to SLC that, you know what, this works. This is what we'd like to do. The research behind it as well is important. The fourth process as well, though, is to ask lots of questions, to get all the stakeholders involved. I've lost count how many parent forums we've done and how many times we've put out surveys to children, how many times we've sat in meetings and said, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And getting everybody's opinion. And so when you look at Matthew Said's book, Rebel Ideas, the importance of diversity, me and Lewis, although we get on well and we're good mates and we have a lot of views, we have a lot of disagreements, and we have diverse views, which is brilliant, which makes it so much better for the outcomes of the children. You need parents' views in there. When you've got teachers who are parents, they see things from a different perspective. Totally. When you get a student's view and you think, oh my goodness, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. There's so many views that you need to take to get and then during the planning process to step 5, you've got to get all the team to plan. It's not my job as curriculum leader to suddenly say, right, here's all your UBD plans, there it is, go away and teach. We've all got to be involved in that. And there's a really good concept that came from Japan called a lesson study project, where instead of having formal lesson observations, tick boxes and say, oh, well done today, that was really good, you've got all your kids organised, lesson objectives were done. Goes away from that and you plan together as a group of 3, and you're looking at student outcomes and you're planning together, and you've got that real sense then of ownership over the lessons. So you can apply that into your planning process. It's really powerful because you've all got ownership of your curriculum. And then the last one, and Lewis has touched upon this a hell of a lot, is the review and adapt. You can't see things as just short-term wins. You've got to look at the long-term project. When we first went into BSM and we sort of got a 3 to 5 year plans, and we look at that and think, oh, is it like we've just done so much beyond that? Is it worth actually having a 5-year plan? Should we just say, right, this is our infinite plan, where these are the things we'd like to achieve. How are we going to get there? And along the way, you're going to review that, and you're going to adapt, and you're going to have gone in maybe 5 or 6 different directions compared to what you said 5 years ago. So you might as well not do a 5-year plan anyway. You just have what you want, and then it just goes like that.
Yeah.
And it's really powerful to experience that. And we're lucky enough that we've done a pretty long stint where you can see where you were at and where you've gone. So yeah, there's the process. It's a 6-stage process, and it's all on one of our articles about infinite learning on our website if you want to know more about that. Lewis, if you want to look at the...
Yeah, I think Alan touched upon something really, really worthwhile there, that you're never going to get there. Wherever you're trying to get to, as an educator, if you're going to be any good at educating or leading, surely you never get there and say, I'm there, that's it, that's enough, that's great. You're looking for the next thing. So again, you know, just on my own experience, when I was young, it was all about getting things done, ticking boxes and thinking, yeah, brilliant, that's done, move on to the next thing. Actually, as you get older and you start to pause and reflect, you think, right, actually, it's more about what you learn along the way and the people that are there and the journey that you've got through PE and through sport and through what you're doing in school. And I think some acceptance of that is really important. And I'd agree with the 6 points Alan talked about, which we wrote about. I think research is crucial, and to get people reading and to get people in your department willing to learn. We worked hard at that. Alan especially. Alan devours books for fun. And what we were expecting from our department went from very little reading to, because that role modeling was happening very much because of Alan to start with, I began reading much more on different subjects. Those comments and the things that you've learned start to transcend into meetings and into individual reviews. And then people start to take on and think, oh, I'll read that book, and you can reference them in conversations. And then that research helps you to pull together resources that will help to educate parents in the forums. And research has a really important part to play in that. But I'd also agree what Alan said there, that it's then a team communication, the team communication that's really important in the decision and the direction that you go and what's right or wrong. And we have an unwritten rule, but it's talked about a lot in our department currently, where, you know, we're in a room and until we decide a way forward, what was talked about in that room never goes out of that room. And once that's decided, and that might take debate, discussion, disagreement, and, you know, raised voices at times, hopefully not, but oftentimes it might happen. And then you're in a position where you're like, right, now everybody's get everything off their chest. Everybody's frank and honest. Now we make a decision based around all that information, and we make the decision that's right moving forward for our why. That's not to say that there are times where we've left the room and I've thought, I'm not sure about that decision, but that's what we've agreed as a team, and that's what we move forward with. I'm sure Alan feels the same, and many people we've worked with. But then that collective becomes really strong because everybody's had their chance to consult, everybody's had their chance to talk, and we've moved forward with a plan that we're going to move forward with, and that people understand. That communication process then with the parents needs careful planning. How does that go across? Is it in the bottom of a newsletter that nobody reads? Is it a link on the website that 5 people from the whole school ever go on? Or are you going to be brave and stand up in front of some parents at a forum? Now, even at a forum, you're in a position where you only get the parents that you probably don't need to be there. They're the great parents that are very supportive of the school, that want to be there because they want to be supportive. So then it's all about role modeling at fixtures, and it's role modeling on the sideline. So then you start to get into the depths of staff development and what you expect from your staff. And then we link back to what we said earlier about recruitment. And because you've recruited the people with the right values and not necessarily a skill set, hopefully those values have got a head start. You can tweak them and you can show what you mean by those values. And maybe what you're working on then is just bringing that skill set up, which is much easier to develop than having somebody change their whole personality and develop a new set of values. And that staff development is probably the most fun part of it in terms of our coaches. We made a conscious decision that was right for our school. When Alan and I arrived, we had a huge team of primary and senior teachers that used to help deliver sport. And most international schools have that. And it's really important that you have those numbers to deliver sport. But what we found was when we were trying to help those staff develop in their coaching, some staff just weren't really that interested in developing their coaching. You know, they were giving up their hour or two a week, which is exactly what's required of them. And they wanted to go out and have fun. They weren't necessarily willing or wanting to learn about coaching. Totally understandable. That's not their job. We're not going to force them to learn, but we then gave them a decision as, do you want to carry on and do it at a standard where we get better and we learn together? Or would you rather not? Some chose not to. So then we went out to try and find external coaches that had the values that we had, that did want that kind of development and did want to progress on. And now, you know, we have something in the region of about 75 coaches that come in to deliver some of our after school programs. And we made a decision very early on with our why. Would we go for depth and real quality in what we try and deliver and what the children learn in each sport? Or do we go for access, and do we improve the number of programs and give the children more access? And, you know, when you look at independent schools and secondary schools, you might have 3 or 4 sports that are delivered at a competitive level. We made that decision for access, and we're really proud that we've got 14 competitive sports across junior and senior school from year 1 to year 13. And there's always something going wrong in those. Of course there is. You know, you've got so many variables. That's 252 hours of sport every week. It's enormous. But it's trying to get those messages across in the right way through role modeling, through the staff development, through the communication to the parents and the staff that you're working with, and making sure that it all links back to why you're doing what you're doing, and where people do step out of line, whether that's staff or parents, that there's a conversation with them that explains, you know, what the expectation is, and going back to that why again. And everybody wants the best for their child. And at the end of the day, that's what teachers want as well. They only ever disagree on whether their child's the most important or whether everyone is. And that's where we've got to be the person who's saying, listen, your child's just as important as everybody else. And we have to try and get that balance in there.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to have to watch this recording back at least twice to digest all this wisdom, boys. Alan, perhaps you can write a post on your top 10 book recommendations for PE teachers as well.
Yeah, we've got a few on our website. We're trying to rotate 3 around every month.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Good. So this was my last thing to wrap it up. How can people interested in your guys' philosophy, learning from you, keeping in touch and up to date with the Infinite Learners website and things? Do you just want to say where we can find you and etc.?
Yep. Search Infinite Leaders Live on YouTube. That's our podcast. I call it a podcast, but we're not on podcasts yet. It's a work in progress. We're a YouTube channel at the moment. We will be available on podcast streaming soon. We've done 2 episodes on that, and that's all about speaking to leaders and getting their insight into how to be better and what we can learn from them. So that's the YouTube channel, Infinite Leaders Live. Our website is the Infinite Learners. The Infinite Learners website includes a whole host of different articles, webinars that are linked to Infinite Leaders Live, and a few other bits and bobs that people can get stuck into and learn from. And we've also got a blog on there that you can subscribe to, and every Monday you'll get that delivered to your inbox with really just rantings from me and Alan on. And if that really excites you, then great, get yourself signed up.
Excellent. Alan, anything to add at the end before I stop recording?
Yeah, I mean, we've got our Twitter pages as well, which are separate from the Infinite Learner, but obviously
slowing down in his old age.
More Sheffield United stuff on there as well. So. But pleasure to be on. Really enjoyed the chat, and we can learn so much from these situations. So the PLC as it is, the worldwide PLC that's been created, I just hope it can continue and continue to grow, and we can all still be communicating after lockdown, and when we're all back at work and busy, that would be a real dream if we could continue that.
It would be. And here, thanks for having us on, Ed. And we think what you're doing is superb, getting yourself out there, being brave and having these kinds of conversations and sharing stuff. It's brilliant. Good man.
Thank you very much, lads. It's been a pleasure.